You think women on the Wild West were just submissive ranch wives enduring a harsh life, but they had mastered legal maneuvers for ending marriages that would have shocked the elite of London or Paris. During the late 19th century, while the rest of the world viewed marriage as an unbreakable prison, the American frontier was quietly becoming the divorce capital of the world. Here's the thing about frontier marriage that sounds completely backwards. The more dangerous and isolated the environment became, the easier it was for a woman to walk away from her husband. Yeah, you heard that right. The frontier was literally a social laboratory where the old rules of domesticity went to die in the dust. In Europe or the eastern United States, getting a divorce was a soul-crushing process that required an act of parliament or proof of extreme scandal. But taking even a short trip to a Western territory changed everything. Your social standing, your legal rights, and your future could be reset with just a few months of residency and a sympathetic local judge. The salinity of marriage laws in the East was about 3 times higher than what a woman's spirit could handle in those restrictive societies. When you were trapped in a bad union in New York or London, the law desperately tried to dilute your misery by demanding impossible standards of evidence while pulling hope directly from your heart. You ended up losing more of your identity than you gained in security. It was like trying to find shade in a desert using a magnifying glass. Western women figured this out the hard way during those brutal years of early settlement in the mid-1800s. Territories back then were basically social experiments with limited female populations and a desperate need to attract more settlers to achieve statehood. Domestic stability took up massive space in the dreams of politicians, and governors had to choose between keeping strict moral codes or offering incentives for women to move west. Most chose incentives, thinking they'd figure out the moral consequences later. Bad choice for the men, but a revolutionary one for the women. Wives would watch their options expand day after day as territories like Wyoming and Utah realized that a happy woman was more valuable than a rigid law. Desperate wives would sneak glances at local newspapers when no one was looking, searching for news of simplified residency requirements that could grant them freedom within months. Their lives would cramp up under the pressure of abusive or negligent husbands, and their minds would start playing tricks on them in the silence of the prairie. Some women reported seeing visions of a life where they weren't just property, horizons that weren't actually there yet in the East. The smart governors quickly learned that marital misery could destroy a territory faster than any outlaw gang or drought. Stories spread through every wagon train about divorce colonies where the chains of the past could be unlinked. These weren't just tall tales. They were blueprints for a new life. Legal freedom became more precious than gold nuggets for thousands of women. Seriously, frontier judges would guard their jurisdiction's reputation for easy outs, like treasure chests, because that's exactly what they were. Economic engines for small towns. When the population grew stagnant, even the most traditional townsfolk would turn a blind eye to the influx of 6-month widows seeking a decree. But here's where frontier women got creative. They started developing tricks that would make modern lawyers impressed. After learning that extreme cruelty was a vague legal term, they had to get specific fast. Their first instinct? Look up at the local statutes and pray for a loophole. But they couldn't just stand there with their mouths open like confused birds. Smart wives rigged up elaborate cases for failure to provide or habitual drunkenness using whatever evidence they had. Old letters and testimony from neighbors became giant funnels, stretched tight across the courtroom. The trick was positioning every detail just right so that the judge's sympathy would flow down into a favorable ruling instead of splashing uselessly back into the husband's defense. Makes sense, right? But here is where it gets interesting, though. Women quickly discovered that using desertion as a reason was like trying to catch rain in a bucket that had been sitting in the sun for weeks. It was a slow process that required the husband to be gone for a year or more, which was common for men chasing gold or cattle. So they developed a routine, cleaning their reputations thoroughly before any court appearance to avoid the nasty brine of counter-accusations. Then there were the divorce colonies. Western towns became surprisingly good at improvised social engineering, creating districts and hotels specifically for women, waiting out their residency requirements. These makeshift systems could funnel every precious drop of legal independence from the territory straight into the hands of the petitioner. Some towns got so good at this that they could process dozens of decrees during a single court session. But wait, it gets weirder. When the law wasn't falling in their favor, desperate women turned to divorce by proxy or moving to specific counties known for friendly clerks. They'd soak up local gossip or thick legal manuals overnight, leaving themselves exposed to the humid air of frontier politics. Come morning, they'd wring out whatever information had condensed, and though the amount was tiny, every drop counted when you were dying for freedom. The real problem with all these methods? The social climate didn't follow a predictable schedule. A town could go weeks without a sympathetic judge, especially in certain religious pockets of the West. The divorce colony trick worked better in some regions than others, depending on how badly the local economy needed the business. Well, clever women started combining techniques. They'd set up permanent residency while also rotating domestic duties among other women in the same situation to save money. The most successful divorcees treated their legal battle like a military operation. Everyone had specific jobs, and slacking off could mean social death for the entire group of women supporting each other. And the weird part is, these early methods actually worked pretty well when conditions were right. A woman could collect enough evidence during a single winter of neglect to last several court sessions. Но полагаться исключительно на прихоть судьи означало ставить на кон все свое будущее. К сожалению, общественное мнение не всегда было на их стороне, что заставляло женщин искать более надежные решения. Им нужно было нечто, что не зависело от настроения присяжных или местных сплетен. Нечто, что они могли контролировать сами, даже когда закон оставался упрямо глухим. Frontier women might have thought they'd solved their problem once they reached a Western town, but storing their reputation? That was a nightmare wrapped in wood and sealed with false hope. Every frontier town carried dozens of massive social prejudices called moral standards. And yes, that was their actual weight. These weren't your garden variety judgments either. We're talking about enormous social beasts that could hold 50 years of tradition, sealed tight with religious fervor. But here is where things got disgusting fast. A woman's reputation sitting in a small town didn't just stay clean for long. The social circle itself would start rotting from the inside out. It turned your precious chance at a new life into a slimy, foul-smelling mess that tasted like someone mixed old grudges with bitter rumors. Small-town gossip absolutely loved these dark, moist social environments and threw parties that would make your stomach turn inside out. Then there's the flavor problem nobody talks about. These new lives weren't brand new. They were built on the scraps of the old ones. Your fresh start would pick up hints of whatever lived in that community before. One day you're enjoying your freedom. The next, it's got notes of social isolation and poverty. Makes sense, right? Society absorbs everything like a thirsty sponge. Women discovered the hard way that their carefully collected freedom could turn into toxic soup within days. The irony was brutal. You could die of social starvation while surrounded by a town full of people who would make you sicker than eating raw salt. Well, desperate times called for desperate measures. Frontier women weren't exactly known for giving up easily, especially when their lives depended on it. They started experimenting, trying anything that might keep their freedom from turning into a failed social experiment. Some women tried adding financial independence to their storage of rights, hoping it would filter out the nasty bits of social stigma. Others rotated their social circles, constantly moving between settlements to prevent any one rumor from getting too gross. Но это были лишь временные меры для проблемы, которая требовала реальных решений. И самое странное, что ответ буквально смотрел им в лицо каждый раз, когда они смотрели на свои пустые кошельки. The solution involved fire, economics, and a technique that would accidentally revolutionize how we view women's property today. Women were about to become accidental entrepreneurs, and their next discovery would change everything about Western survival forever. They weren't exactly known for their business breakthroughs, but when your children are hungry and your ex-husband is trying to seize your land, you get creative fast. Some clever woman figured out that fire could actually save her legal standing. She started deliberately burning the old bridges of dependency by opening her own business before the divorce was even finalized. Sounds crazy? Well, this charring trick was pure genius, disguised as rebellion. The process was simple but brilliant. Women would light controlled fires of industry inside empty storefronts, letting the flames of ambition blacken the old interior of their domestic lives. They'd stop before the social structure fell apart, leaving behind a layer of hardened, blackened independence coating the inside walls of their new life. Then they'd fill these burnt businesses with their own earnings and wait for magic to happen. And the weird part is, it actually worked. That blackened layer of commercial grit wasn't just decoration. It acted like society's own water filter. The charred surface of a hard-working reputation grabbed onto nasty rumors and the bacteria of sexism that made a woman's life go bad quickly. Think of it as the world's first social charcoal filter system, invented by ladies who were often told they couldn't even manage a checkbook. These women noticed their charred reputation stayed cleaner longer. Instead of turning green and slimy after just a few days of gossip, this filtered life could last weeks without becoming completely disgusting. The burnt wood of hard work didn't just trap bad stuff. It actually slowed down the growth of harmful prejudices that thrived in regular domestic containers. What makes this even more amazing is that these women accidentally stumbled onto something we still use today: the Married Women's Property Acts. Modern labor laws and property rights char their own barrels for similar reasons. That burnt wood changes the liquid of the law inside, filtering out impurities of the past and adding the flavor of autonomy. Western women weren't trying to make fancy political statements. They just wanted a life that wouldn't kill them. The charring method spread quickly among frontier communities because it actually saved lives. Word travels fast when you find something that keeps your family from dying of poverty or being poisoned by an abusive ex. Women started ordering their daughters to char every aspect of their education before entering the marriage market. But even this clever trick had limitations. Charred barrels still couldn't perform miracles with truly contaminated social circles, and the process used up precious resources and emotional energy. Women needed backup plans when industry wasn't enough. Then there's something even more surprising that they discovered about keeping a life fresh. They found that adding certain valuable metals to their social strategy created almost magical results that seemed impossible to believe. While women were busy charring their businesses and cursing at spoiled opportunities, some clever mothers discovered something fascinating. Tossing silver skills into their survival kit wasn't just superstition. It was accidental genius. Those shiny pieces of talent weren't there for luck. They were there for survival. Here's what happened. Women noticed that lives containing silver skills, like nursing, teaching, or dressmaking, stayed clearer longer. The water of their daily life didn't turn that nasty green color of dependency as fast. It didn't smell like a swamp after 2 weeks on their own. Makes sense, right? Well, these women didn't know they were dealing with one of nature's most powerful antibacterial agents, economic utility. Silver kills bacteria. Not some of them, most of them. Modern history proves this works because economic value messes with the cell walls of social exclusion, basically destroying the little buggers before they can multiply. Women stumbled onto this centuries before anyone understood how social germs existed. They just knew their freedom lasted longer when a precious skill sat at the bottom of their daily routine. But here's the weird part. Some communities swore their silver-treated women tasted better too, cleaner, less like drinking liquid failure mixed with disappointment. Women would argue over which skills worked best. Teaching seemed popular, though nobody could explain why. Maybe it was purer. Maybe it was just frontier psychology at work. The really smart women hoarded silver skills specifically for water treatment, that is, staying afloat in a male-dominated economy. When gold, marriage ran low, they'd keep their silver skills. Food could run out, husbands could disappear, but a skill? That was life or death. Real treasure meant staying alive long enough to spend your freedom on land. Then there's the practical side. Silver skills were easy to retrieve when refilling the barrel of a new life. Unlike other additives that dissolved or rotted, like charm or beauty, silver stayed silver. A woman could fish out her skill, rinse it off, and toss it into a fresh community. Recycling at its finest. Modern industries still use silver in medical equipment for the same antibacterial properties, and modern careers still use these silver skills for social purification. Those desperate frontier women accidentally discovered something that high-tech industries use today. Not bad for ladies who thought formal education was optional. Of course, silver wasn't perfect. It couldn't fix a life that was already completely rotten. It worked best as prevention, not a cure. Smart women learned to add their skills to their lives immediately, not wait until problems started brewing. The silver trick spread through frontier cabins faster than gossip about buried treasure. Women who ignored this method often found themselves dealing with sick prospects and mutinous situations, demanding better terms from life. But even silver had its limits when the drought of opportunity lasted weeks and the fresh water of luck ran dangerously low. That's when women needed something more dramatic than coins and charred wood. While silver's skills and charred businesses helped keep stored rights fresher, they still faced their biggest nightmare, being surrounded by an endless ocean of men they couldn't trust. That's when the craftiest women turned to what sounds like pure magic, turning deadly saltwater situations into life-saving independence. The process, called social distillation, wasn't new, but women had to get creative with frontier materials. Boil down the toxic marriage, catch the steam of opportunity, let it cool back into a new identity, and boom, the salt of the old life stays behind. Simple in theory, absolutely brutal in practice when you're rocking on the waves of a chaotic frontier with limited fuel. One of the most successful divorcees ever actually ordered a special distillation rig built right into her life, a boarding house. Her neighbors thought she was crazy until they realized this contraption could save their lives during those endless weeks of economic hardship. The setup used copper pots of labor heated over carefully controlled fires of ambition, with metal pans positioned to catch every precious drop of condensed profit. But here's where it gets interesting and dangerous. These rigs needed constant attention, because one wrong move could start a social fire. Women had to balance keeping the flame hot enough to create the steam of progress, while not burning down their only escape route. Talk about high-stakes cooking. The fuel problem was massive too. Every piece of emotional wood burned for distillation was wood that couldn't be used for traditional roles or emergency repairs. Some women got so desperate they started burning furniture, their old social status, spare rope, even old habits, anything that would generate the heat of change. The smell of that transformation must have been absolutely terrible to the neighbors. Then there's the speed issue nobody talks about. These homemade stills produced freedom incredibly slowly. We're talking maybe a few cups of independence per hour if you were lucky. A thirsty family of 3 children needed gallons daily just to survive, let alone stay healthy enough to thrive or work effectively. Smart women learned to time their distillation runs perfectly. They'd fire up the still during calm weather, when the local economy wasn't pitching wildly, making it easier to manage the delicate setup. Some even took turns staying awake all night to keep the process running continuously. The copper tubing they used often came from melted-down jewelry, stolen moments of peace, or even discarded traditions. Ironic that their plundered past literally became their lifeline. Women discovered that copper, resilience, worked better than other materials because it conducted heat efficiently and didn't rust in the salty frontier air. Of course, distillation wasn't their only trick. When fuel ran low or social storms made fire too risky, women had to get even more creative with their survival methods. While charcoal businesses and silver skills were clever solutions, they didn't stop there. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and some mothers got downright creative with their water-saving tricks. The most popular backup plan? Adding alcohol to their life barrels. Now, this wasn't about getting drunk, though that was probably a nice side effect in a sod house. They discovered that mixing a bit of spirit, audacity, into their daily routine actually slowed down the nasty bacteria of social decay. The alcohol acted like a preservative, keeping their precious supply of dignity drinkable for longer stretches at sea. I mean, on the prairie. Smart, right? But audacity wasn't the only weapon in their arsenal. Some women swore by adding vinegar, sharpness to their social barrels. Vinegar's acidic bite didn't just mask the horrible taste of a spoiled reputation. It actually fought off harmful microbes of gossip, too. They would also toss in citrus peels, whatever education they could get, or whatever spices of personality they had lying around. Cinnamon, cloves, anything that might cover up the funky flavors brewing in those wooden social containers. Then there were the really desperate filtering attempts. Picture a mother trying to strain murky legal rights through layers of sand, patience, stuffed into old cloth bags of endurance. Some used pieces of bread, charity, as makeshift filters, believing that simple goodness would catch impurities. Did it work? Sometimes. Was it pretty gross? Absolutely. The weirdest concoction had to be what some called frontier coffee. This bizarre drink mixed weak resources, questionable legal rights, and whatever random herbs they could scrounge up from the prairie. Mint leaves, strange berries, even ground up tree bark, grit. Anything to make their situation more bearable. It probably tasted awful, but it was better than dying of spiritual thirst. Of course, not every experiment ended well. Some women tried using lead pipes, dangerous alliances, or shady deals, thinking the metal would keep things fresh. What they didn't know was that lead slowly poisoned anyone who drank from it. They would get sick, weak, and confused without understanding why their improved life setup was actually killing them. The trial and error approach cost lives, but it also led to genuine discoveries. Women were basically floating laboratories, testing wild theories about social purification while fighting for survival on the open ocean of the West. While these makeshift solutions kept many families alive, the most innovative women were already working on something far more ambitious. Some mothers were experimenting with techniques that went way beyond simple filtering and flavoring. Methods that could actually transform the salt of the frontier itself into something life-giving through surprisingly advanced processes. When regular distillation wasn't cutting it, they got creative with animal bladders, communal bonds. These tough, stretchy sacks made perfect watertight bags for solar distillation of their problems. They'd fill a bladder with their saltwater life, tie it shut, then hang it in the direct sunlight of public scrutiny. The heat would cause evaporation inside the bladder, and fresh droplets of truth would collect on the inner walls. They could then carefully drain the condensed purity through a small hole of opportunity. Gross? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. But why stop at hanging bags when you could go underground? Some discovered that burying clay pots of their old life created natural evaporation chambers. The Earth's steady temperature and the pot's porous surface worked together like a slow-motion still. The old bitterness would gradually seep through the clay walls, leaving salt crystals of resentment behind, while cleaner identity collected in buried containers nearby. This method took patience, but it worked even when resources were scarce. Then there's the seaweed trick that sounds almost too weird to believe. They noticed that certain types of kelp, local support networks, could actually help separate the salt from the water naturally. When mixed with their harsh reality and left to sit, these plants would absorb the salt of their misery while releasing cleaner liquid. The process wasn't perfect, but it reduced the saltiness enough to make life drinkable in emergencies. Marine plants basically became living filters. Let's not forget about those massive ship cannons, the local church and state authorities, sitting around doing nothing between political battles. Experienced women figured out they could use these metal beasts as heat exchangers for faster distillation of their rights. They'd run the pipes of their case through or around the cannon barrels of authority, then heat the metal with the fire of public demand. The salt of the old law flowing through the system would turn to the steam of new rights much quicker than traditional methods. The cannon's mass held the heat of the movement longer, too, making the whole process more efficient. Who knew weapons of social war could save lives through legal purification? And the weird part is what happened when ships reached colder, northern waters like Montana or the Dakotas. Women developed emergency ice melting techniques that were surprisingly sophisticated. They'd collect sea ice, temporary alliances, which naturally contains less salt than liquid saltwater, and melt it down in controlled batches of community effort. Fresh snow, new settlers, was even better, almost pure potential, just waiting to be melted. Some groups built special ice collection nets, societies, specifically for this purpose. These advanced methods separated the amateur survivors from the true experts of frontier life. While landlubbers in the East worried about finding treasure maps, rich husbands, seasoned Western women were mastering chemistry and physics without even knowing it. They turned their cabins into floating laboratories where every experiment could mean the difference between spiritual life and death. The most successful frontier women weren't just good at enduring, they were brilliant at staying free through innovation, determination, and some seriously clever social wizardry. They realized that in the vast, dry landscape of the 19th century, the real gold wasn't in the ground. It was in the ability to purify a bitter life into something you could actually live with. In the ground. It was in the ability to purify a bitter life into something you could actually live with.